Set the ready, cleaner, safer energy. All thanks to 1 billion predictions.
You talk about the wall of worry around Chinese equities has crumbled. Why is that, and to what extent, and how long will that be sustained, do you think?
Good morning. Well, we've been very busy seeing a lot of companies, and I think, the bottom line that the message that the companies are going to tell us is that they are they're much more nimble, they're more adaptive. So some of the wall of worries that the market is pricing very quickly could be a bit overdone. Whereas, as you mentioned earlier, we're seeing that companies are delivering growth at an accelerating pace. They're benefiting from the recovery dynamics, and some of them are even beating expectations.
Do you expect then the earnings strength to continue, or will you have to factor in a squeeze on margins?
I mean, I think that's a very good question, and it's what we're working very hard on. The backdrop, obviously, with the recovery is very positive for growth as always, but as you mentioned, there are these inflationary pressures and challenges that companies have to deal with. So we still think we go back to the fundamentals of companies. So it's about pricing power. Do companies have that pricing power? Are they flexible? Are they able to mitigate some of these pockets of pressures that they're seeing that's affecting their business?
And Nicola, as you pointed out, it's a good problem to have. I mean, if you did have a drag in earnings, this is the type of drag that you want to see. I want to talk to you about short term, though, in terms of sentiment and the people that you talk to. Do you think sentiment is good enough to take advantage of fundamentally what's looking like a sound market?
Well, I mean, we do see that liquidity is improving, so you could see that the market turnover in the A-share as well as the Hong Kong markets are improving. So I think these are things that we monitor. We don't really know how to predict them, but we monitor, and we think that those things, as long as they continue to be positive, then sentiment should continue to be quite well supported.
Okay, and in terms of then your preference within the equity space, is it A over H? Is it one over the other? And within each of those, is it more value or is it more growth?
I think we don't discriminate between it. We invest in both asset classes.
Okay.
Obviously, right now we acknowledge that we're looking for companies that will benefit from the current cyclical recovery. But ultimately, we always overlay it with long-term structural drivers that we like, and then we focus on them. Just to give you an example, in the consumer sector, the cyclical forces would be just this pent-up demand and savings, and as activities normalize, the services and upgrade demand will continue. But as I mentioned before, ultimately it's about the longer-term structural growth drivers in the consumption side. We really like, things that are upgrade that can capture the upgrade demand. We like the premiumization of products and better quality of life and services. So we still hone into companies that could deliver that pricing power.
Nicola, we just have some lines crossing. We knew that these talks were going to be happening between the US and China on the phase one deal. We now have confirmation of that from the Chinese side, saying that China and the US, their trade negotiations did talk on the phone. The negotiations were constructive. They had constructive talks. These are lines coming through from China. Liu He, so he's the vice premier, and of course he led these trade negotiations with the Trump administration. He was partaking in this conversation with his US counterpart, Catherine Tai, from the USTR. So Liu and Tai have candid, constructive communications. These are the lines crossing now. We will continue to bring you up to speed on this developing story as and when we get it. Nicola, in terms of, we've got the trade story, of course, but in terms of what's happening on the tech front, we have this antitrust drive from regulators here. How are you looking at the upstream and downstream parts of the technology ecosystem, and where is your spotlight at this point?
Yeah, so as you rightly pointed out, the China tech sector extends beyond just internet. It also includes hardware, software, and data infrastructure stocks. So with the trade talks, that obviously has been the very central issue that has been out of the control of the companies because it's affected a lot of how they do business. But we still like the upstream right now because obviously we think that the cyclical demand recovery is very positive, but at the same time you've got that long-term structural force of semiconductor going into your autos, your computers, your supercomputers, etc. So I think that's where we see some positive catalysts on, and the same argument can be made with selective hardware and software companies as well. The internet platform, we invariably we definitely see companies based on target prices, and previously some of these target prices were reached, and the market priced in quite a lot at a very sort of the price in quite a lot quite quickly. But we do think over the long term, it is still where a lot of the very attractive growth generations lie, and so we continue to be constructive on the sector.
Okay, and as far as then, that's your overall buy list, companies that are trading at good value, obviously, good growth stories, pricing power, what have you. I want to complicate things a little bit further for you, but I know you have the answer to this. ESG, how do you then overlay that sort of picking mechanism over everything that you just mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, we think ESG is very important for the Hong Kong, as an investor in the Hong Kong-China market. It's actually always been part of our framework, but we've formalized it by incorporating ESG into our target value calculation that I mentioned. We think it's a very important part of as we assess the value creation and the quality of these companies, and it's partly also an indicator of what good management is. So we do have a bottom-up target price, and for companies that deliver good ESG, we have a higher target price, and those that don't, we do penalize.
So I think it's important to highlight the overall global economic growth outlook and what that means for markets. Here in Asia, we had very strong markets, particularly in China last year, as it really led the global recovery. That leadership, however, is very clearly passed to the U.S. What we're now dealing with in many Asian markets is a resurgence of COVID cases, and that impacts the overall economic outlook in two ways. Number one, you are seeing relatively weak domestic demand, particularly on the consumer side, in multiple markets around Asia. We saw that in the China numbers last week and the prior week. It also is impacting manufacturing, however. As plants shut down, reopen, shut down, we are seeing the longest lead times in manufacturing over 2 decades, which does matter. So even if we have strength in manufacturing sector, that only represents about 1/4 of the overall economy for most Asian countries. And so it is a significant drag until we can get the retail and consumer demand back up and running.
James, as you know, good news being bad news is helping the likes of the RBM debt and the BOK. They're pretty helpless when it comes to the recovery process. leading some to speculate that rates are rising soon, and that's not necessarily good news for the stock market.
It will absolutely be a critical conversation for all of us over the course of the next 12 to 18 months. JP Morgan House view is that you will see a spike, particularly in core inflation, as we move through the rest of this year. JP Morgan numbers has core inflation going to 2.8%, which would be the highest print since 1995. However, the backdrop to that is incredibly important. We're coming out of a 2-decade period of deflationary trends where we were all debating the dangers of deflation. Now that we're simply moving back to a more normalized inflation environment, there's a degree of overreaction in portions of the conversation in recent months. We don't see significant tapering in any major market globally until deep into 2022, with the sole exception of Bank of England in the UK. And we are looking at central banks basically taking a wait-and-see approach that's consistent with what we've heard out of the Fed, is consistent with what we heard out of central banks around the IMF World Bank spring meetings in Washington, D.C. Focus is waiting on the data and not focusing on forecasting. So we don't see a real danger of central banks moving too fast. If anything, that's likely the opposite.
Also, looking at what's going on with the market level in terms of things we're doing about eliminating risks and putting prices as well, this is very good to evaluate based on what? You looking at the good or the B or neither?
So it's ultimately both, but I think we can't just focus on the multiple without focusing on the directionality of earnings. One of the things that we've seen in global markets for a long time now, valuations matter only after a catalyst, and if earnings revisions continue to be as positive as they've been, in the United States we've seen 45% of companies meeting already increased expectations. In the EU, similar types of numbers. The very, very positive earnings cycle that we're seeing in most global markets now does not provide that negative catalyst. The two things that we're most focused on for a potential market correction, number one, would be significant changes in liquidity. Now, we did see a peak of liquidity in the first quarter of 2021, but we don't see a significant drawdown throughout the rest of this year. The second thing that we'd be focused on, and this obviously links to the earnings conversation, is a change in the business cycle. And there, we are looking for a slow reduction in PMIs as we move through the second half of this year. However, it's a reduction from elevated levels. We still see PMI sitting above 51, which is a very positive market for equity as an asset class.
Great. Because we've also got a little bit further about the tensions that between the US and China, not least with the coordinate by the Secretary of Affairs. Talking about security from the world as described as being and saying that that engagement is coming and very quickly concerned about the geopolitical headwinds of which and other political changes.
I think we have to be concerned, and we've written a lot about it at JP Morgan. Ultimately, you're looking at a significant shift in the ordering of how countries interact with each other. And that's not going to be quick, and it's not going to be easy. What we're still very focused on, however, is the fact that there are still significant areas of cooperation. If we think on topics like climate change, if we think on topics like financial inclusion, then there are still very clear areas of cooperation between multiple countries around the world. We still think that cooperation will proceed because it is in the national interest of countries to do that. And so we don't think it will be purely a competitive structure moving forward, but it's very clear.
Are you looking for an easy and affordable logistics service? Look no further. Eurosender.com is the easiest, most...
What I probably took too lightly at the time, looking back, was that, like, if for whatever reason I would be sitting with a ton of credit card debt if that whole thing didn't pan out.
Misfits Market is an online grocery delivery service that sells ugly, imperfect produce for cheap. In 2020, Misfits Market shipped 77 billion pounds of food to more than 400,000 households across the U.S. But in just the first 4 months of 2021, Misfits Market procured the same amount of food as it did in all of 2020. In fact, since launching in 2018, Misfits Market is expanded to both countries and has over 1,000 employees. It has received over $300 million in funding. Bloomberg reports its valuation at $1 billion, putting it in the But Misfits Market wasn't an obvious success. fact, it was just one of many businesses started by its 29-year-old founder, Avi Ramat. There are three numbers to look out for in this speech. 35,000, the amount Avi left on the table to pursue his dream of entrepreneurship. 150,000, the amount of credit card debt he personally survived to launch Misfits Market, and 350 million, Misfits Market's expected sales for 2020.
Perfect.
Great. Take it away, Nate. Here's how Avi Ramet built Misfits Market into an online grocery juggernaut. For CNBC Make It, I'm Nate Skid. This is Founder Effect. Avi's story starts like so many others. When his parents were just 28 years old, they risked it all to move he and his brother from India to the U.S. in search of more opportunity and freedom. His family settled in suburban Atlanta, where he spent a lot of time alone in his bedroom, dreaming up crazy ideas for potential ways to get rich. Then he discovered Amazon Marketplace and saw his first business opportunity.
My idea was we have all these required reading books and textbooks that like high school made us buy every year, and then they went stale after 12 months, and no one knew what to do with them. So I basically went to all my classmates and was like, I will buy your textbooks and your required reading books for $20, $30, money that matters to you. And then I go and resell all of this on Amazon for $80 or $90. And for me, it was like a huge deal. It was my first time doing any of this stuff. I kind of learned how to be scrappy, how to get something off the ground.
That wasn't the only or even most successful business he started in high school. His parents were adamant that he get good grades, apply to top colleges, and nail his SAT. It was the latter where he found an income stream.
I had an SAT tutoring company in the back half of my high school years because I got a really good score on the SAT and had a few friends who scored well as well. And so we ended up banding together and built a tutoring program and basically sold tutoring service to other people.
He considered his ventures as hobbies, just a way to earn some cash on the side. But the experience left a taste in his mouth for the freedom that comes with really early.
Here I am sitting in a building with 1,000 other people, doing the same thing, and it certainly wasn't as fun as like reselling books on Amazon, which is kind of crazy to say. So I ended up actually getting drawn back into the entrepreneurship world, and I actually restarted that tutoring company that I've been kind of working on in high school.
This time, he added a software company and developed a predictive algorithm. The only limitation for the company was his time. In 2012, 2 years into the finance program at the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania, he made a decision to put his education on hold.
I was like, I can't do this for real while I'm in school. So I took a year off from school. These days, gap years are a lot more common. Back then, it wasn't common. So I actually got a lot of heat from the Penn administration, from my parents for dropping out of college for a year. I moved to San Francisco, and then I lived in LA for a little bit. I worked on a bunch of startups.
Avi actually raised $25,000 from the incubator to build something, anything. He founded 3 companies in quick succession. First, there was the men's shopping platform called Trending.
We got off the ground. We got like 5,000 customers. They were paying, and then we're like, this is too hard of a business to scale. Big mistake, because now there's a company called Stitch Fix, which does pretty much the exact same thing.
Then there was Storytime, a social media shopping application.
Social buying. Interesting idea. I think it was probably early for the time.
Then he took on companies.
All 3 of these didn't go well, so I was like, okay, I think getting a company off the ground is hard and probably not for me.
After taking stock of his failures, he realized he skipped a crucial step. He needed some real-world experience. So he finished his degree and went to work at an asset management company called Apollo, where he landed in a department called Opportunistic Investment. But while he was there, he befriended a colleague who ended up in a prominent VC. That friend was able to play an outsized role in Misfits Market success.
I lasted 10 and a half months, 11 months. And the reason I remember that and not a year is it was actually a big decision. You get a bonus a year in, 12 months in.
That decision cost him a bonus of about $35,000.
What was painful for me was being on the investor side of the table. We met management teams of these incredible companies that scaled from 0 to X over the course of 3, 4, 5 years. The misery for me was less so I hate my job, it was more so like my job's fine. I really want that guy's job. Like that's really what I want to be doing. And I've tasted enough of it. I tried this in college, I tried this in high school. It didn't quite work, but like I have the foundation. Now I have a finance background, I understand how to code. I've tried a few things a few times and failed. I think that I need to take the practice again.
So in 2014, we flew back to San Francisco and started yet another company with two co-founders, an intensive 12-week coding boot camp called Horizon. That company lasted just over 2 years and graduated some 700 students. But it was Apple picking while on a roll at Quant in Pennsylvania with his girlfriend, where he put it all together.
I don't want this to sound like this is like a cliche light bulb moment. I think it's part of the light bulb moment. There's a couple different light bulb moments, but I spent some time talking to the farmer there, and I was like, hey, like, who do you sell to, and what do you do with all these things? And I think the most interesting thing was, I was like, all the apples are on the ground. Very few of them are on the trees. What do you do with all these apples on the ground? He was like, well, those are like number 2 and number 3 grade apples. Those can't really be sold to stores, so we'll put them in a cold storage shed for a month and a half, and if we can't sell them to our neighbors or anything like that, we'll toss them.
In high school, he discovered arbitrage, buying textbooks low and selling high. In college, he learned about building a distribution company with Trend. He saw the importance of creating a seamless shopping experience with StoreTime. And at Apollo, he was at the table with startups to explore ideas on how to scale up. And he couldn't shake what that founder told him about what happened to those number 2 apples.
By the time it kind of got to a point where, okay, the idea is sort of bursting out of my head, and I have a pretty good plan on how to implement and get off the ground, the end of the Horizons days were already there, and so we ended up shutting that down, and I was like, all right, my next thing is I'm going to get this company off the ground. It wasn't named at the time, and so I moved to Philadelphia permanently and said, all right, let's do this thing. Drove back to actually the exact same farm that we did that apple picking in.
Really?
Yeah, that same farm.
He found a USDA list of organic farming in the region and called every one of them, 50 in all. Then he spent the next few months building relationships with about a dozen farmers. His goal was to get them to sell them their number 2 or 3 produce cheap, dirt cheap. So each time he visited their farms, even if it was just to say hi, he'd buy about $50 worth of produce.
I lived in a studio apartment. I started stacking. I had like peaches, apples, tomatoes, onions, all in my apartment. There was no business to sell them yet, but like it was just my way of saying thank you for your help, so I keep buying this stuff.
Meanwhile, he built a pre-order page on Shopify to see if there was demand for ugly organic produce. All he needed was a healthy list of email addresses. So when you saw the supply side, you knew that there was supply, right? You would have apple picking, you see the apples, but like, what was the sense of the demand? Because, these are farmers, they understood that they had this number 2 apples, or whatever they're called. They didn't see that opportunity, so why did you?
I think the short answer is because I've spent so much time trying to build these other consumer-facing businesses, whether it's the social shopping, social buying apps, or Trendbin, the fashion one, or even like the tutoring companies. I spent a lot of time selling to consumers and other products, not food, obviously. And I had a pretty decent sense of what would resonate in terms of value proposition. And I think the idea that I could buy something that on the supply side wasn't valued and sell it to a set of consumers at a lower price point, therefore transfer that value to them, I had a hunch that there was demand.
He spent $150 on a logo, $1,000 on ads, and this did anything. He took out 5 credit cards and maxed them out.
I applied for a different credit card, approved all of it.
The hobby was bailed out by a close friend who happens to be a real investor with a bit of a stretch, and not a big one. Edward Lander provided a crucial influx of cash, helping Hobby pay off his credit card debt so he could start buying it.
He's like, this looks interesting. I think you're going to have to raise some money for it pretty soon, otherwise those credit cards and bills are going to come crashing down on you. And, again, I spent some time planning, so I was sort of like, if I had gone out to go raise institutional capital from traditional funds without a real business, without revenue, without like a debt, I would be locked up the door.
To keep overhead low, Hobby rented everything, a 700 square foot storage facility, the fridge in the corner to keep the produce, the trucks he used to deliver his products. He found a couple of employees on Craigslist to help him box up the orders and used the navigation app on his phone to help him find the most efficient delivery route. He maxed out at 15 boxes a day.
And so at some point I need to get more drivers. So I actually started hiring drivers, renting more vans. I realized kind of lumped in that us delivering on our own vehicles would prevent scaling this quickly because it's a whole different beast. Scaling kind of like a disruptor on the last mile. By the end of 2018, Misfits Market was shipping about 200 boxes a week, which got the attention of his buddy from Apollo, the one who left to work for that consumer. And so I kind of explained to him the whole story, like, hey, this is what I did after I left the company we worked at, left this coding school, now here's what I'm doing here at Market. He's like, cool, interesting, keep me updated. And, I would keep him updated pretty much every week and be like, hey, we're shipping 20 boxes a week. Now we're shipping 60 boxes a week. Now we're shipping 200 boxes a week. And at one point in time, we're probably shipping a couple hundred orders a week. He was like, hey, you want to talk to our investment team?
We helped Capital put up $2 million in that first quarter. It offered to provide any future VC to the company.
And I didn't shop around the offer. I didn't go go try to raise money from 10 other people. Just because I wasn't optimizing for that at the time. It wasn't about getting the best valuation or the least dilution. It was really just here are partners that believe in me, believe in what we're trying to do here. They want to move quickly, and I don't have to waste my time doing too much fundraising.
How long was the time range between your kicking efforts to your
4 weeks, a month.
Why should you invest in stocks on eToro?
With eToro, I can invest in stocks with zero.
It was time to invest in all areas of the business, from physical operations and customer service to the fulfillment center and the marketing department.
Actually, I think the person we're going to hire is someone to run customer service, just because people were writing in a bunch of questions, like, what is this fruit, and where's my box? We had a customer service hire, who still works for us, by the way, I'm proud to say. Our second hire was someone on the fulfillment and operations side to help manage the warehouse. And our third hire was someone to run purchasing and procurement, to go build these farm relationships, to scale them, to manage the weekly purchasing, figure out how much we needed.
Hobby set an aggressive goal for the future, but Misfits Market isn't. Its customer base doubled week after week, and under a year, Misfits Market went from a 700 square foot warehouse into a 10,000 square foot facility. But Hobby wasn't about growth for the sake of growth. The bigger Misfits Market became, the more leverage he had in the lower the company's pricing.
This kind of goes to the logistics point that I made earlier. For us, growth and scale, they're important from a business perspective because it's important for every business to grow and scale. But for us, it was also important because growth and scale meant we're able to provide access to a much larger chunk of people more quickly. It's that flywheel. That growth and scale means that we have more efficient operations because we can leverage scale. More efficient operations means lower costs. Means we can pass on more savings to customers. If we pass on more savings to customers, we go back to that access part of the flywheel, the access affordability part of the flywheel, and everything. So that was always the goal, to grow really quickly, get up to as many zip codes as possible so we can serve as many people as possible, leverage that scale to drive cost efficiencies, leverage those cost efficiencies to drive further access to affordability. And it's growth was always grow, not just to grow because big numbers are good, because it is fundamentally part of our mission and good for our value proposition.
By employing a large network of third-party carriers for the last year, Misfits Market was able to scale every single zip code in New Jersey and New York. Then came the pandemic.
It was basically the week of March 7th or something like that, and I think was when everything went crazy. And we actually ended up having to turn off our checkout page so we could accept no new customers. We didn't access capacity in our fulfillment center. We turned off checkout for about 45 days or so while we kind of went through that backlog just to make sure that we were serving our existing customers effectively before we took on a bunch of new customers.
And Misfits Market growth was continuing unabated. By March 2021, exactly 1 year after COVID closed down the economy, Misfits Market was 5 times larger, with a valuation of $1.1 billion. In April 2021, Misfits Market received a Series C funding of $200 million. Last year, Misfits Market opened an online marketplace where customers can buy staples like pasta, flour, and eggs. In its first 4 years of business, Misfits Market generated about $200,000 in revenue. By the end of 2021, Avi expects that number to hit $350 million. I guess I'll go to my final question.
We moved the fulfillment center basically 4 times in our first year and a half of existence. That was challenging, picking up and moving 10 employees, then 40, then 200 and 500 employees, and an entire operation that large is a challenging thing to do. do, and it's costly as well. You're running through one center at the same time, you're shifting things back and forth. Part of that is like I didn't necessarily trust the growth. You know, I was like, okay, we're gonna grow, but I don't really know if we're gonna go 4x next year, so I don't really know that yet. And infrastructure, looking back, we probably should have.
Nu bij T-Mobile. Go deals voor ondernemers. Supersterke deals voor superscherpe prijzen. En gratis aansluiten ter waarde van €20. Dus go naar t-mobile.nl/ondernemer.
Untitled.com is the easiest way to send news anywhere in the world. Origin and destination. Review a summary, pay, and that's it. You're done. All in less than 5 minutes. And that's good in the time they need. You will receive a confirmation email with tracking numbers and people management. That's no 5 minutes. Take time, money, and everything for the wide sharing service.
Sacrificed a lot to sort of make all this happen. Entrepreneurship was something they're probably interested in. My father certainly was, but something they couldn't do. They've kind of been able to do it, so it kind of ties in with that.
he now has. There's a trendy e-commerce fad behind those obscure, eye-catching products that still have feeds on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. It's called dropshipping.
It's definitely an industry that is growing. We're seeing companies going public now just based on the terms of dropshipping.
The model relies on targeted ads designed to stop consumers from scrolling long enough to make an impulse purchase, usually from a Shopify site set up solely for that product.
Many of those same younger consumers, they are also looking for quick ways to make money, and this really is the rise of young people.
It's like sales. Sales is what the old school days were long. If you're a good salesman, you can sell people.
At age 21, Camille Safar's dropshipping sales topped $1.7 million in 2020.
You basically what you get is taking product from supplier to the US or China, then they send the product directly to you and you never see it.
Some sellers say dropshipping is a get-rich-quick scheme to make easy millions without ever leaving the couch. Others call it a serious business.
There are more security factors.
We talked to some big name dropshippers about how they made millions with viral content and how the e-commerce sector's content is transforming. I never got a shipping contraction like this, and when they did finally get here, they came in this ripped bag from China Post, and they were stuffed loosely inside. They smelled pretty awful, and they were the wrong size. I thought about returning them, but returns and dropship items overseas can be pretty complicated. I looked for a customer service number on the store where I got these, and I couldn't find one, and I opted not to return them because I would have had to pay my own return fee.
False advertising is definitely something in the dropshipping. Products you sell on you, and you want to buy it, so you buy it. It's not like a hassle.
Hello? Hey Vernon, this is Landon from Wix.com. Yeah, we don't do cookie cutter template driven.
Dropshipping is also what's responsible if you order something from Amazon, but it arrives in a box from Walmart or any other major retailer.
The customers get confused. Like, I ordered something from Amazon. This is not my product. I've got so many messages. Like, why did you send me this?
Bradley Sutton provides software for Amazon sellers, and he tested out dropshipping in the 2020 holiday season. He sold things like RC cars on his Amazon page, dropshipped from cheaper listings on Walmart and elsewhere.
Part of Amazon's dropshipping policy is that you do not deliver with packaging that is from another retailer. But my account didn't get shut down. I grossed over $500,000, but I kind of stopped that test because it's just not a sustainable model.
Amazon has a long-standing policy against dropshipping from other retailers, and a spokesperson told CNBC, if a seller violates our policy, we will no longer allow them to directly fulfill customer orders.
You have Shopify, you have BigCommerce, you have Woocommerce, you have Amazon, you have eBay. And if you get banned on one platform, you move up to the next one.
The dropshipping that fills social media feeds isn't happening on Amazon. It thrives on Shopify.
They need this one-stop shop for you to set up a store. It's just super easy for you to start selling online. And a lot of these dropshippers know it.
On Shopify's Help Center, there's an entire section devoted to tips and strategies for dropshipping.
The main advantage of dropshipping is that you don't have to worry about storing, packaging, or shipping your products.
In an analysis of more than 120,000 Shopify stores, online consumer protection company FakeSpot found more than 25,000 that engaged in some form of fraudulent activity, like counterfeits, privacy leaks, and buying fake reviews. Of those, almost 72% showed evidence of dropshipping tactics being used in their business. FakeSpot has a Chrome plugin that alerts shoppers if a seller on Amazon, Walmart, eBay, Best Buy, or Sephora can't be trusted. If using the added capabilities to detect untrustworthy stores on Shopify too. FakeSpot says most of the fraudulent stores appear to be China-based merchants posing as U.S. small businesses.
You want to support the local households, but these sellers are not from the United States. They're from around the world, and they're just utilizing this to make a buck.
Still, Shopify is home to the online stores of major brands like Heinz, Staples, Jenny Craig, and Gymshark. With more sellers than ever before signing up for a Shopify storefront in Q3 last year, Shopify shares more than doubled in 2020, and its market cap recently surpassed $150 billion.
35% of young Americans started a side hustle during the pandemic. Most of them are doing it on Shopify, which is why you saw more signups in Q3 than ever before. But the way they're doing it is totally different. They're using avenues like TikTok.
In a survey of more than 10,000 consumers, Shopify found that 54% of shoppers aged 18 to 35 discover brands on social media, and 28% made a purchase there.
These young consumers are going to be the shopkeepers of 2021, and the way they buy is going to be the way they're going to sell.
We're going for impulse buys with people that are not necessarily intending to buy something when they log on Facebook or Instagram.
Marketing is probably 60% of the game.
Sitar sells 80 to 90% of his products through Facebook ads, and the rest largely through ads on YouTube. TikTok ads can now play directly within Shopify stores, following a TikTok Shopify partnership announced.
Are you a fresher?
We have a video editor on our team, so when we have a product,
Are you a fresher?
we set the video to tell the story of what the product does, why it's valuable.
Or a working professional?
I always say to people, you're going to test around about 5% products before you find something that actually does something.
This pineapple slicer and these dog grooming gloves are examples of products that flopped for Sitar.
It's all about finding things that people haven't tried before. We have softwares that we use where they do AI technology and they tell us what are the best products at the moment, what's trending.
Where are you looking at jobs?
Was this iPhone privacy screen protector. Soon after, another one of his items did $1 million in sales in one quarter. Many dropshippers find
India.
products like phone accessories and Bluetooth headphones on AliExpress, a China-based online marketplace where small businesses sell products directly to international buyers.
You can go on AliExpress right now, search up Bluetooth headphones, and find all these suppliers that will produce Bluetooth headphones for you. Per unit, the costs are a couple dollars. And the same thing happens with things like blankets, lighting, small plastic electronic accessories.
The burrito blanket is another well-known product that's commonly dropshipped from Chinese suppliers.
I needed that burrito blanket. That's why I have one. It's wonderful.
The dropshipping world is largely unregulated and without trademarks, so hit products can be sold by anyone.
The supplier will directly ship the product to the customer without it ever going through me.
You will see domain names called Official Burrito Blanket, Real Burrito Blanket, The Burrito Blanket. And they basically contacted the factory in China and started dropshipping burrito blankets. And now these burrito blankets are being sold on dozens of.
Okay, so you are from India and you're looking for a job in India.
Looking to capitalize on their success.
Okay. So first thing, let me point out what are the things you should do. Okay. Have a good LinkedIn profile. Second, do an internship. Third, internship. Reach out to people for opportunity.
on Shopify to help.
When people are abusing those brand rights, they have the right to be able to say, right, we're going to pull this site down.
The Shopify spokesperson told CNBC, "We have multiple teams who handle potential violations of Shopify's acceptable use policy, which clearly outlines the activities that are prohibited on our platform, including copying. And we don't hesitate to action stores when found in violation."
Who are already working in analytics. Untitled Chapter 20. Many places as possible.
But there is a large group of dropshippers who are running legitimate businesses, branding products they've found themselves.
I was an Army veteran living in Philadelphia, trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And it was 2016 when I first heard about this dropshipping idea.
In 2020, Peroni's sales of a garden trimming attachment topped $1.9 million in 6 months. In October 2020, he did $150,000 in sales of fleece-lined leggings in just 3 weeks.
It takes a lot of grind and hustle to actually make it work properly. Managing just the supplier, managing the customer, and then managing marketing. These are completely 3 different skill sets.
Now a whole side industry of dropshipping specialists has popped up, offering tips on how to do it right and make it big.
It's unfortunate that a lot of people think that this will make them rich. It's just the next snake oil salespeople doing the same thing that has been happening in ancient history. They're just doing it right now with a completely different weapon, which is dropshipping.
There are very few laws and regulations around dropshipping, but if it's done carelessly, it leads to months-long shipping times, unvetted products straight from China, and unhappy customers facing a challenging overseas returns process.
A lot of people, they get into the business model and they're lazy. They're not looking at it like a business. They're looking at it like a cash grab.
To keep shipping times down and quality control up, big dropshippers use agents who know the supply industry in China and a sourcing company to speed up the shipping. But that all costs a lot, as do some extra tactics used by less savory dropshippers.
You buy fake reviews to distinguish yourself, fake ratings, fake upvotes.
Still, huge product markup can make it worthwhile. Profitable sellers usually charge at least 2 or 3 times the price they paid for an item on AliExpress.
It's going to be a cat and mouse game between Shopify and a lot of these more fraudulent dropshippers. A lot of these stores look really legitimate on the surface.
Before buying, read shipping promises and return policies. Try contacting customer service.
If you have really good customer service, like you're getting back to people within 24 hours and giving them tracking updates, that is what 90% of people are looking for. And people that are doing it legitimately, like myself, are offering refunds, right? Like we're not trying to take somebody's money.
Do they have an easy contact? Do they have a phone number? If they don't have a phone number on their website, then you know for sure that they've got some sketchy behind.
And for those looking to make millions in the current online shopping craze, some say dropshipping should only be the first step in creating a successful, sustainable e-commerce business.
It's there to let you know that what you're trying to sell does get a lot of customers. Once you know that, then go and take the next leap, which is buy them in bulk, get a fulfillment center. So we've actually got real brands now, all run in-house by us, and that's the long-term game plan.
I lead the data analytics and machine learning team at Quant Services, where one of the areas we particularly focus on is loyalty fraud detection and prevention. So let's start from the beginning. So what exactly is loyalty fraud? How do we define it? And this is challenging in by itself because some would say it's more cybersecurity things like data breaches, account takeovers, identity thefts, similar. Whereas others would point more towards the loyalty-specific aspects like fraud related to enrollment, insider frauds, or related to contact center or cashier activity, rule abuse, broader gaming, and and so on. Traditionally, program owners had to employ a number of different tools to address all the different risks. But one of the different rules and limits within the program, for example, banning members from gaining more than a set amount of points in a period of time, or preventing more than a set number of redemption transactions over a set period of time. There are two key problems with this approach, however. The first one is that it's not very flexible, it's not very dynamic, and with programs becoming more and more complex, integrating data from multiple sources, the task of creating and maintaining these rules is very difficult, if not sometimes impossible. And the other is that these rules typically do negatively affect the overall customer experience. So how can machine learning help with all that? So machine learning works in a way that it takes historical data and detects certain patterns and relationships with this data that are otherwise very difficult to track in rules or recorded and so on. So for example, we look at things like the average speed within which points are being awarded, what's the ratios between earning and burning points, what are the different redemption options in different customer segment groups, and so on. Now, taking that historical data, training the models on that, we can apply it or use data to basically let people say whether a given activity is normal, regular, something that's in the past, can be explained one way or another, or is some sort of an anomaly, outlier, suspicious or fraudulent behavior. So it basically speeds up the process of creating these rules. The rules are no longer explicitly defined or transparent to the program owner, and basically the machine learning models can later on retrain themselves and make sure that whenever something changes with the program, that they require no manual tweaks or changes to the rules, but more of the looking at what's going on in the system and adapting dynamically.
Nicola wanted to start a tampon business. Freddie had an awesome idea for a dog.
Do you get a buzz out of buying something? A little tingle of excitement? It feels good, doesn't it? That's your brain producing dopamine. It's the same rush you get from chocolate or sex. During lockdown, people were increasingly forced to rely on the internet to get their retail dopamine hits. In fact, over $4 trillion was spent buying stuff online in 2020, almost a third more than the year before. Shopping is going through a radical shift right now, and the pandemic has sped us up. Retailers have been forced to adapt and innovate. Driving this revolution, you. Or to be more specific, your data. Here's how. If you went shopping in the 16th century, you'd get personalized service.
So, for example, if you wanted to buy your suit of armor, you would go to an armorer who would knock it up to your specifications.
But bespoke services came with a premium price tag. Then came the Industrial Revolution, with its big factories, assembly lines, and automation. Mass production made goods cheaper, but a lot less personalized. And distribution was tricky. Products had to be taken from factories to what was essentially a small warehouse near where the customers lived. Basically, a shop.
The only way you could buy was through these shops, and you had very little choice, actually. You had very few shops near you, and if you wanted something, you had to go. Your choice was between one of those shops.
Fast forward to the advent of superstores and out-of-town malls, and these choices grew, but everything changed when the internet came along.
Suddenly, the shopper has more choice than ever, and it's really up to the producer and the retailer to offer the consumer what they want when they want it.
With more choice came more power for the consumer.
30 years ago, we in the brands used to define the brand ourselves and the product.
Glossy ads like these have pushed products to consumers for decades.
And the consumers used to, like so many Pavlov's dogs, they used to come and buy.
But the internet has put consumers in the driving seat, calling the shots on what's cool and what's not through reviews, social media posts, and influencers. Leading the way in this retail revolution is China. This is Gutian. She's a huge live streaming star.
And now I have 1.8 million followers on the app, and they're just like mine.
But unlike live streaming in the West, which is used mostly for entertainment or gaming, Gutian vlogs to flog, selling thousands of beauty products to her 1.8 million social media followers. She's one of thousands of influencers, also known as key opinion leaders.
Oh my God!
Selling anything from lipsticks to food and even plants. Live streaming selling has helped to make China the world leader in e-commerce. It's forecast that in 2021, half of everything bought in China will be bought online.
For Gen Z and millennial, like me, most of them prefer shopping online than going to a physical store because of larger range of choices and lower price.
The Chinese internet market is very, very highly developed. The scale of the market is over $2 trillion worth of consumption online. They have something called Singles Day, where they do billions of dollars worth of transactions in an hour.
3 huge companies dominate: Alibaba, JD.com, and Pinduoduo, which combined account for almost 80% of the market.
The other thing about the Chinese market that's very interesting is that whereas we have like Google in search, and we have Facebook in social media, Amazon in e-commerce, and PayPal in payments, they put it all together in single organizations. So they have entire ecosystems, and many Chinese consumers live their entire lives in those ecosystems.
These super app ecosystems give the retailers intimate knowledge of exactly what their users like, want, and buy.
And of course, all of this requires a huge amount of data, and the Chinese are much more willing at this point to allow data tracking of everything that they do than many people are in the West.
With more direct insight into customer demands, retailers can maximize their margins and cut waste. Some Chinese tech firms are even using people's digital footprint to influence the way goods are produced, known as consumer to manufacturer.
That's really cutting out even the brands. So the factories then start dealing directly with consumers, and of course can be flexing their production capacity directly depending on the consumer demand.
Western retailers are playing catch-up. For years, they've rested on their laurels, regarding the internet as secondary to the store. Not helped, perhaps, by the fact that they had sunk a lot of money into store space. America, for example, has 2.2 square meters of retail space for every single one of its inhabitants, 6 times the level of China. But Western retailers also missed a big trick. Their customers' big data.
Retailers historically had very little data about their individual customers. They used to have store credit cards, that was about it. But the online companies had collected huge amounts of data about their customers. When you consider that against what the retailers had, the retailers, traditional brands were really flying blind. That is why the internet companies have beaten the incumbent retailers and brands for the most part over the last 20 years.
Did you know that you can make money from YouTube without creating videos? That's right.
Yeah.
The pandemic was a death knell for many brands. 8,700 stores were closed by big chain retailers in America in 2020. But the companies that did harness the power of their consumers' data are thriving. Amazon exceeded $100 billion in quarterly sales for the first time ever in the last 3 months of 2020.
Amazon, of course, wrote the book on individual customer data and its uses. And of course, as they've got bigger and bigger and bigger, they've got more data than anybody else.
With its established logistical system and smooth purchasing process, Amazon may seem a useful online platform for brands to peddle their wares. But though Amazon passes on the sale to the brand, it doesn't pass on much of the customer's data, which means companies know very little about who is buying their products. So some brands are cutting the Amazon cord to focus on what's known as direct-to-consumer selling, such as Nike.
It decided to sell only online via the Nike website. What it did then was it developed ways of keeping much closer tabs on its customers. For example, a membership program.
Nike's loyalty scheme allows it to create customer profiles of its 250 million members, 70 million of whom joined during the pandemic. Nike's apps offer the customer a personalized experience in return for a detailed insight into their behavior.
If you sign up to their app, you'll give them information about how much you run every day, what sports clubs you're doing, how much yoga you're doing, all that sort of stuff. And this helps inform Nike about what to produce. They're able to see where you are, and that also informs the way they think about where to put their stores.
Nike's apps let users customize their own shoes, and in doing so learn the customer's favorite colors and designs. And by tracking how far they run, can even let the customer know when it's time to splash out